If you've noticed that everything you buy, no matter the price you pay for it, breaks, then you're not alone. I remember so vividly when there was a conspiracy theory going around when I was a little younger that iPhones were deliberately being slowed down after a certain period of time. And more people came out sort of claiming that they had had a similar experience. And I remember feeling such a sense of relief in this when it turns out that it was proven that it was fact, and Apple came out and said that they in fact do that. And I wasn't crazy because my phone, which I had paid a lot of money for, was slowing down and was almost unusable in a very short period of time, despite being one of the best and most popular products on the market. This, of course, turned out not to be a conspiracy theory at all, but rather an intentional practice of Apple that's called planned obsolescence. So, in economics and industrial design, planned obsolescence is the idea of planning and designing a product with an artificially limited useful time or purposefully weak design so that it becomes obsolete after a certain predetermined period of time, upon which it slowly starts just not working anymore, or it might be perceived as unfashionable, or it just suddenly stops working. And this is justified by the idea of shortening a replacement cycle that is generating long term sales volumes by lowering the interval between repeat purchases. In short, it's the purposeful reduction of a product's lifespan to make consumers buy working replacements. And this obviously has huge environmental and economical impacts. And there are two amazing videos that already have been made out there, which I recommend everyone checking out if you want to learn more about planned obsolescence. But I was immediately drawn to planned obsolescence as a concept by interest in the sort of existential aspects of planned obsolescence, aka how it impacts our lives on a deeper level. Now, there are a couple of aspects of this concept that is worth highlighting for the following discussion regarding how this phenomenon affects us in an existential way. And that is how planned obsolescence is, as the word suggests, engineered or inorganic. This was not something companies or designers tended towards because it's what they or the consumers preferred. It was a business strategy that was created and has become the new normal. And not only is it wholly inorganic, it specifically acknowledges that there's no other purpose for this plan except for profit. There's no other reason for intentionally making products designed to break than for the possibility to sell more. This is not what the consumer wants. This is not a better way of making something. This is not sustainable or useful. It's profitable. Which is interesting because usually things are more complicated than that. When criticizing systems, for example, like capitalism or socialism or the internet or production methods, we have a complex relationship to them. Because at the end of the day, they're all systems that are created for a greater good or with the intention of being a greater good, for efficiency, with an intention to better most people's lives on some level. Even when aspects of the idea fails to do so, we have to talk about how it does. But planned obsolescence is not that way. Not unless you think that people generally would be better off buying things that break and having to replace them very often. And most people don't. Not because they know or even care about economic and environmental implications, I think, but because this is a very natural part of a human existence. We like permanence. We like cherishing things, and we dislike constant change. We feel safe when things and people stay. I think any critique of planned obsolescence runs the risk of being seen as superficial because we like to think about our relationship with things as inherently so, but I beg to differ. Consumerism is indeed superficial. Commodification renders anything superficial because putting a price on something and selling it in a market reduces anything's real value, that is, its emotional, experiential, or true value, by way of making it a monetary value. But being attached to things or artifacts is not inherently superficial. This is why it matters that the British Museum still keeps pieces of Greek statues and temples. These things are not just things, they're objects we have injected with meaning, that have collected histories throughout their lives just like us humans do. And we've always done that. We are gatherers after all. Daniel Lord Smale claims in his essay Goods and People in a Deep Historical Perspective that our modern consumer society is the result of a long history of man's relationship with material things that goes all the way back to even the origins of humanity, in contrast to what is commonly referred to as a short historical interpretation that this is a phenomenon that has arisen after the rise of capitalism. He claims that goods as such have been incorporated in the same way as our distant biological ancestors incorporated mitochondria, and that the genealogy of goods and people is connected and co-evolved in a historically conditioned relationship. He proceeds to ask who's the boss in this dynamic of people and things? Who is the active force at play? Do people own things or do things own people? And the food writer Michael Pollan once had a similar thought when he knelt in the soil and looked after his potato plant. We like to think that humans domesticated plants and animals to satisfy our desires, but imagine if it was the potato that domesticated man. Now, Pollan teases us, of course, but Smale points out how the idea that we live in a symbiotic relationship with inorganic objects, as well as other animals and people, might not be that far-fetched. And if that's the case, then what happens to us when nothing is permanent? We live in a world where nothing lasts. Your computer breaks after 4 years, your phone after 2. News are old as fast as they've been published. You don't have time even to process the TikTok you just watched before it's over, and you need to watch a new one to avoid seeing the one you just watched on repeat. There used to be 2 seasons in fashion, and now there's at least 4. Even the things we're told are good quality, that we're told and promised would last a lifetime, like Doc Martens or your fridge, they crumble and break today within no time. Or the newest car models who need to be upgraded every 3rd year, despite being created in the name of protecting the environment. The reputation of quality is simply that, a reputation that these companies have gotten in the past, which no longer seems to be true. And this leads to 2 things. It leads to a permeating impermanence and a fundamental lack of trust. Nothing lasting is so normalized that we take it for granted. I've not lived in a world where this wasn't the case, so it's my normal. And just consider that for a moment. We live in a world where things are created to not last, to break on us, which are impossible to fix, and so they need to be replaced. At this point, we rarely even think about fixing them. There's no patching up a t-shirt because even if you aren't educated on garments, you will still know that a poorly constructed garment in a thin, plastically viscose is not worth saving or spending all that time and effort to repair. You can tell just by touching it. We often talk about how the internet causes our long-term memory to be rendered obsolete, but I reckon it's a bit worse than that actually, or that it's a bit more all-encompassing. The virtual flow of impermanence is very much reflected in our current material reality. And this, I believe, is detrimental to our mental health because we need attachment. We need to fix things when they're broken, to cherish things that have stayed with us for a long time, to not throw away something as soon as it has a chip or dent in it. But everything feels low quality and everything feels and is replaceable. So even other people feel replaceable and we feel replaceable. Why shouldn't we, honestly? When everything is so materially meaningless, why would anything else in this world be? And I think this hits at the heart of the real existential issue here, the lack of any real permanence. We know that there was a time where things did last, though. We get excited about old appliances and gadgets because of how geniusly they're constructed, how long they last. And just like your grandma had the same hair clip and mixing bowl all her life, so did she also remain married all her life. And we look back at that with awe today, right? We long for a time of the past where things seem real and substantial, because very little in our current world is. But this is dangerous as well, because we forget that our grandma couldn't legally divorce anyone and that she wasn't even permitted to own a credit card legally until 1974. We also forget that products back in the day were laced with deadly substances left and right. So, in other words, there's much to be appreciated about the lives that we've made for ourselves in the current day and age. Yet, all that progress seems to be impossible to appreciate. When we're struggling so much with the issue of impermanence because nothing of this shit seems to be truly valuable when everything just breaks. The other aspect of planned obsolescence is the lack of trust that it constructs in our culture. When the people who are the best phone makers in the world go on stages and brag about how great their product is, only to intentionally also make it break, we're being lied to in the simplest terms. In fact, we're being lied to by most businesses on a mass scale. We still want to believe that we live in a world where people are proud of the products that they put out and that they wouldn't, of course, intentionally make them shitty, but they do. One might even call it gaslighting when it ends up being so reality shifting as it is. There's no safety in shelving out even extra money for the higher quality products that they claim to provide when they're not. I don't think we should underestimate how important it is that we can trust. It's often what's cited as one of the main reasons why certain political systems work and others don't. Trust is the fabric of much function in our world. Money and loans are just trust. Politics are just trust. Material things being real is to some degree an issue of trust as well. We have to believe for anything to work. And I'm not a huge fan of Francis Fukuyama's work or opinions, but reading his book Trust, Social Virtues, and Creation of Prosperity was very informative in describing the breakdown of trust in American culture. He puts it like this: family life, which constitutes the smallest and most basic form of association, has deteriorated markedly since the 1960s, with a sharp increase in rates of divorce and single parent families. Beyond the family, too, there's been a steady breakdown of older communities like neighborhoods, churches, and workplaces. At the same time, there's been a vast increase in the general level of distrust, as measured by the wariness that Americans have for their fellow citizen due to the rise of crime, or in the massive increases in litigations as a means of settling disputes. In recent years, the state, often in the guise of the court system, has supported a rapidly exchanging set of individual rights that have undermined the abilities of larger communities to set standards for the behaviors of their members. Thus, the United States today presents a contradictory picture of a society living off a great fund of previously accumulated social capital that gives it a rich and dynamic associational life, while at the same time manifesting extremes of distrusts and asocial individualism that tend to isolate and atomize its members. This type of individualism always existed in a potential form, yet through most of America's existence, it has been kept in check by strong communal currents. And when I recall the disbelief that I had that Apple would intentionally make a product that would stop working, and the outrage I felt about the price that they were charging for it on top of that, not only did they make me feel crazy, right, for thinking that it would even be possible that that was the case, but they dared charge me a stupid amount for that experience. And now I no longer really trust most companies. And I think in turn, it feels that companies don't trust their consumers as well. There's no respect or pride in the way they operate. It feels on some level that being the best business person means being the most sly trickster on the market. And of course, nothing is really permanent. You never step in the same river twice. People will always come and go. All of us are going to die at some point. Everything is always in motion, but perhaps this is why we cling on to things that last like we do. Objects that have been handed down for generations and exist alongside us can lend a bit of comfort and delusions in moments where the overwhelming sense that nothing is forever creeps in. In Norway, we have a saying that was said when they wrote and signed the constitution. They said, "Enig og tro til Dovre faller," or "We swear to agree and trust until Dovre falls." Dovre being a mountain, the mountain representing everlasting, unchanging safety and grounding. And the permanence of the mountain is what our whole constitution relies on. We need to anchor ourselves to things and stuff like that. So, if objects affect the way that we are both in the physical and mental realm, which seems to be highly probable, then practices such as planned obsolescence should be considered a grave mistake and, I think, crime. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for the economy, and it's bad for our own experiences of our lives. We should live lives full of meaning and substance, and the things around us should reflect those virtues. It should be how we work and consume and love. And being robbed of that experience is a profound loss. On a societal scale, I hope we follow France and make some laws that render the practice of planned obsolescence obsolete, despite that being extremely difficult to do in practice. And as an individual solution, I have at any rate committed to using subreddits like Buy It Once whenever I need new appliances, as well as largely shopping vintage and being mindful when buying something new. There are luckily many very knowledgeable influencers out there who review new clothing collections and point out what is poor and good quality. And a vintage Gucci bag sells for like €100 on eBay and will truly last you a lifetime. These are objects you can wear with pride, right? And take good care of. And this truly gives my life meaning. It anchors my experience in something of at least semi-permanent value. So yeah, I encourage people to do the same.